To better understand the piece that I chose, you have to kind of understand the era in which it was made, which was the Byzantine era. Up until the late 11th century, southern Italy occupied the western border of the vast Byzantine Empire. Even after this area fell under Norman rule in 1071, Italy maintained a strong link with Byzantium through trade, and this link was expressed in the art of the period. We saw a lot of large illustrated Bibles, exalted rolls, liturgical scrolls containing text for this celebration of Easter produced in the Benevento region of southern Italy. Enjoyed great popularity from about 1050 onward. Miniature illustrations also in Bibles, which related to contemporary monumental wall paintings produced in Rome, were strongly influenced by the Christian painting cycles from Roman churches. After the sack of the Constantinople in 1204 by Christian armies of the Fourth Crusade, precious objects from the Byzantium made their way to Italian soil and profoundly influenced the art produced there, especially the brightly colored gold ground panels that proliferated during the 13th century. This is where we saw a lot of Madonna and Child, as well as more biblical paintings depicting stories from the Bible. For instance, by Bellin the foremost painter period working in the Tuscan city of Lucca is one of the examples. And so it was very common to see many paintings of different depictions of the Madonna and the Christ child. At the end of the 13th century and the beginning of the 14th century, we saw more of three great masters appear to change the course of painting. The Florentine Giotto de Bone, I'm probably butchering that, the Roman Pietro Calvini, and the Sienese painter Duccio di Buonasenga, which was active from 1278 to 1378. And while Giotto's figures are volumetric rather than linear, and the emotions they express are varied and convincingly human rather than stylized, he created a new kind of pictorial space with an almost measurable depth. With Giotto, the flat world of 13th century Italian painting was transformed into an analog for the real world. Now, with Duccio, who's the painter I went with, founder of the Sienese School of Painting, brought a lyrical expressiveness and intense spiritual gravity to the formalized Italiano-Byzantine tradition. In a small devotional panel of the Madonna and Child, Duccio bridged the gap between the spiritual world of the figures and the real world of the viewer by means of illustrationic, I'm not even going to try that saying that, parapet, among the first of its kind in Western painting. Along with other notable artists such as Taddeo Gaddi, Maso di Banco, and so forth and so on. So the painting I went with was the Rucellai Madonna, done by Duccio. The painting was completed in 1285. Again, I chose this because it was one of the better renditions that I found that's not done by in more towards the Renaissance era. The Virgin and Child enthroned, surrounded by angels, known as the Rucellai Madonna. The piece itself is the largest painting on wood from the 13th century known to date. It was a commissioned piece to Duccio in 1285 by the Florentine Confraternity, Compagnia de Laudasi, a community that met in the church of Santa Maria Novella in Florence to sing the praises of the Virgin. Mary herself is seated on a richly carved wooden throne. Her shoulders are covered by a banner symbolizing her honor and status. On her knees sits the Christ child dressed in traditional ancient robes with rich red cloth woven with gold around his hips. He is giving the sign of benediction and is blessing with his right hand. The throne is being held by 6 kneeling angels who seem to be suspended in the void, giving the impression that this is a sudden apparition of the holy image before the worshippers. The foreshortened representation of the throne and the slightly sideways position of the Virgin are expedients frequently used by 13th century painters to add a certain depth to compositions. The frame of the painting is decorated with roundels containing small figures of saints. At the bottom is possible to recognize, thanks to the black and white dress of the Dominican friars, the founder of the Dominican order, and Saint Peter Martyr, as well as saints from the Dominicans who officiated over the Church of Santa Maria Novella. This is one of the oldest and best known works by Duccio, who in early 1280s was most likely worked alongside Florentine painter Cimabue, alongside formal elements taken from the Byzantine traditions, such as the gold lettering on the Christ child's cloak, the signs used to construct the anatomies of the faces, and Duccio also reveals his sensitivity to the naturalism and elegance of Gothic art, as can be seen in the distribution of light and shade and the draped fabrics surrounding the Virgin Mary, and in the wavy, undulated movements of the borders. The Rucellai Madonna, by which the painting is known, comes from the chapel in which it was hung in the end of the 16th century, which was owned by the Rucellai family. Now, there was some a little bit of drama with the piece, surprisingly, mainly because at the time Cimabue also did his own rendition of it, which was Virgin enthroned with angels, and it was thought that Duccio possibly created his piece either with Cimabue or possibly started the Rucellai Madonna, and either Cimabue finished it or vice versa. There's not enough evidence to support on who exactly did the piece, and as you can see, they are almost identical, except for Cimabue's is a bit more detailed. Vasari mentioned this painting as located in the church San Francisco in the Pisa in 1811 during the Neapoleonic War. It was transferred to Paris. It was also restored in 1937 to 1938. Throughout the analysis executed before the restoration showed the painting to be a rather precarious and in rather precarious condition. Cimabue's painting, the central figures and the golden background, similar to the Rucellai Madonna, had to be completely repainted because it was in that much disarray. From the results of the analysis, some of the doubts have been arised concerning the authorship of the painting. Among others, it was assumed the work of Duccio, after painting, and then possibly created as an after painting by Cimabue. So some people believe it is Cimabue's work, the Rucellai Madonna, and some people do not. And it's still a debated topic. They were both done similarly with tempera on wood, and both had gold backgrounds. Again, the paintings, the colors that they used, and the pigments were almost alike, but that could be said for a lot of the paintings of that time. The most impressive thing with this is the amount of detail for both the Rucellai and Cimabue's painting. But the Rucellai is over 14 feet tall. She's meant to be an icon. She's twice the size of the Virgin Mary herself is twice the size of a human being. I can only imagine what it would look like in person. But the painting itself, as you can see, is very similar. But the one thing that stood out the most to me in the Byzantine influence, of course, are the elongated hands of the Virgin, as well as the angels, but also the coloration that Duccio was able to use, the pinks, the greens, the purples, and the different shades of blue. And the most noticeable thing that stood out to me was the Virgin's face herself. It makes you wonder if he almost didn't value the model that he used, because you see her face in several of his pieces of the Virgin and the Christ child. As you see here, again, the Christ child is always seen giving benediction and blessing, and it kind of creates the wonder of, like, later Renaissance paintings of the same person, the same face seen in many paintings. Who was she or he, if it was a male model? And was there a story there on why they were most used for these pieces? Because it's a beautiful face. It's the softened features, the rounded cheeks. That's how you can tell it is the Virgin. mother is the effeminate face. You don't see her breasts, or you see the barest hint of a knee. But it's meant to be similar to a nun's garments. It's meant to hide the female form. It's meant to hide the female body, and create almost a wall, for lack of a better term, to keep the female form in, and while still depicting the holy story. Again, you can see other influences in that same shape of the face in some of his paintings, other religious paintings. And as with all Byzantine art, it was predominantly religious. And so you constantly see other depictions. And as you see here, a later painting done by Duccio, the blues are much more vibrant. This would almost be what you would see along a church wall, with the gold plating and the way that the frame opens up to show the Virgin Mary and the Christ child. But in this painting, the Christ child is almost seen he does not have his halo. He is very small, and it almost reminds you of a very embryonic, new life, very tiny. And that struck me as interesting on why he changed from a much more detailed and older looking Christ child toddler to almost a still newly formed child that could still be in the womb, but is meant to depict the birth of that child, and still be innocent and almost giving comfort to the Virgin Mary, as if she knows already what will become of her child, and the sacrifice he will meant to give. And that's why I chose this particular artist and this particular painting, along with some of his other work, to use as reference, because the amount of serenity is beautiful and very touching and very peaceful. And it just seemed to fit with kind of my journey and finding my faith again. So that's why I chose this piece, and Duccio, and I hope this was a good presentation. Thank you.